Hey everyone, Cody Hayes here, and welcome to our second part looking at Plato and Aristotle. And this is where we left off, the idea with Plato and his forms. Um, Plato held to the idea that humans have innate or rational knowledge from the world of being, basically, that being the understanding that um, when you are born, you are not born with a blank slate, but you have knowledge implanted in you from birth. And in Plato's view, he believed this came from this world of being. Um, Other individuals who would agree with him on innate knowledge might not necessarily agree with him on his idea of forms. Continuing that on, from Plato's perspective, this innate knowledge will come to the surface once the individual has the right encounter with the right philosopher. One of the examples I gave, of course I have two of them here, but the one with Socrates and the illiterate slave, where this slave boy is given a algebra question, and with a little bit of help he's able to answer it properly. And then Socrates gives this commentary about how the boy always really had that knowledge there, but it was dormant, but the right philosopher brought it out. And then Plato also believed that the soul was eternal, and that through his belief in forms, he believed that an individual would truly know what is real after his or her death. And the idea was how, with the soul being liberated, you could tap into that extra form of knowledge from the world of being that you can't access while you're here on Earth. And of course, while you're here on Earth, you're limited in what you could know. I kind of put it another way, how, if you are a philosopher and you love wisdom and all that, no one knows for certain what's on the other side. A lot of it's believed, based on faith of what that ever that might be. But until you're really on that other side, you don't know for certain. And even those who believe they have seen the other side, modern day psychologists would say, well, no, this is really what happened to them. But even in Plato's time, you didn't have that. If you had someone who believed they saw the other side, you could go down the road to someone who also believed they saw the other side, but it could be two different stories. So, there you go. So turning to Aristotle, who is the man on the right of the portrait there of the School of Athens, the younger man, to say something with Aristotle, when one of the times I first remembered hearing about him back in high school, I remember that the teacher that I had for history said he may have been the smartest man that ever walked the earth, because, he was a student of Plato, who was a student of Socrates. And in fact, Aristotle's most famous student was Alexander the Great, the famous general emperor. And it's often thought that the reason that Alexander was someone who received the title the Great was perhaps because of the fact he was taught by Aristotle. But anyway, Aristotle disagreed with Plato over the idea of forms. Plato held to innate knowledge, Aristotle held to what's called empirical knowledge, and I'll say something about that. This is probably a major reason why Aristotle did not succeed as the head of Plato's academy after Plato's death, because he disagreed with Plato over this idea of forms. And Aristotle's view in empirical knowledge, that's why in the painting of the School of Athens he's gesturing towards the earth. It represents his view of knowledge being here. Empiricists generally hold that individuals are born with a blank slate, and that everything they know at whatever particular point in their life has come to them through their senses and by experiences, their five senses and by experience. And so, for Aristotle, he held the view that knowledge was here, and that the world of being was here. It wasn't some distant place, it was right here. And so he disagreed with Plato on that point. Now, I will say that that Aristotle was not necessarily totally hardcore in his empiricism. We will see an individual later who was. but we are moving into the area where we're looking at the idea of how humans gain and receive knowledge, and of course looking at that with Aristotle and with Plato. Reality to Aristotle could be explained through what is called teleology, the study of a goal or a purpose. I mentioned this teleology when I discussed Jean-Paul Sartre, because Sartre's view of how humans are free, pure libertarianism, is based on the idea that he believes God doesn't exist, and so humans were created for a set purpose. But to go into detail more of this teleology, it consists of four causes. The first of these is the material cause, what something is made of. And if we were going to use, humans, in this example, we could say flesh, bones, muscles, veins, blood. And then the second cause is the efficient cause, the force that brought the idea into being. If we are a theist, someone who believes in God, we could say, well, God was the force that brought humans into being. If we're someone like Jean-Paul Sartre, we'd say we don't know. But Sartre believed it was not God because, he would probably say, well, I just don't see it. Then the third is the formal cause, the shape or the idea, i.e., what is it supposed to look like? And again, if we are going to focus on humans in this example, we could say, well, it's supposed to look like a person for the formal cause. And then the final cause is the purpose of the idea, i.e., why is it here? Why does it exist? Using humans again as this example, if you're a theist, answering the final cause, the purpose of the idea, you could answer that we don't know, God knows, one day we will know perhaps, but it's all in the mind of God. Whereas if you are someone like Jean-Paul Sartre, you would say that we don't know why we're here and therefore we're determined to be free because we were not created for a set purpose, unlike, say, a book or a paper cutter, i.e. letter opener, or, an ink pen or something like that. Now, Aristotle in the Golden Mean, which is one of his more famous teachings, one of Aristotle's ethical teachings is what has been called the Golden Mean, which more or less means everything in moderation. Because I have a more or less on there, that should give you pause for something. Because exceptions to this are murder, theft, and adultery, and I'll say something about that along with a little bit of an explanation of the Golden Mean. In my seated classes, I often occasionally ask the question on exams, and I do it probably for this class. I do the same thing with ethics when I teach that class, and we discuss the Golden Mean. I'll have a question, literally the Golden Mean means everything in moderation. And I'll have students that answer true. Well, the answer is false. It doesn't literally mean everything in moderation. In a general sense, it does, but not in a literal sense, because you can't be like, for example, oh, I don't know, Jack the Ripper, and say, well, I really would like to kill 4 prostitutes tonight, but I think I'll just take a moderate number of 2 and only kill 2. No, you cannot commit murder, period. It doesn't matter. You can't steal in a moderate sense, and you cannot commit adultery in a moderate sense. Another exception of this that Aristotle gives in his Nicomachean Ethics, which is named after his son Nicomacheus, Aristotle gives an example of you have 10 pounds of meat and he chooses a moderate number of 6. Why 6 and not 5, I don't know, but regardless, just staying with the story, he says that 6 pounds of meat might be okay for Milos, who was a famous Greco-Roman wrestler, but that would be too much for a gymnast. But still, if we take it literally, 5 or 6 pounds of meat would be the moderate number out of 10. But that would be too much for some amount of people. It's like, if you have 10 pounds of meat, you choose a moderate number of 5, that might be okay for, say, a linebacker, but that would be too much for a basketball player. So there are exceptions to this idea. And part of the reason I think Aristotle made that very clear was because one of the things with some philosophies is you will have some people who, again, will try to take advantage of a system and say, well, we're following it, but really they're committing unethical acts. So when you throw out things and say, no, you can't do this, or no, you can't do that, well, you're trying to go after those people that might use your philosophy for selfish means. But that's all we have for Plato and Aristotle. So if you have any questions, please feel free to send a message to me in the Q&A forum or send me an email. Until then, take care.